over the vast expanse of Kurukshetra, king Yudhishthira's troops set out to find a suitable place to encamp. The king, son of Kunti and one of the 5 Pandava brothers, was determined to establish his camp in a location that would bring him good fortune. He sought out a spot that was level, cool, and abundant with grass and fuel, avoiding areas considered sacred or consecrated to the gods. As they journeyed on, Yudhishthira's men came across a high and wide river which flowed through the heart of Kurukshetra. The river was said to be a sacred to its waters, pure and cleansing. Kesava, another name for Krishna, who had accompanied Partha Arjuna on this campaign, took charge of securing the area. He ordered his men to dig a moat around their encampment, ensuring that it would be protected from any potential threats. Meanwhile, Drashtit Yamna, a skilled warrior and member of the Prishata clan, along with Uyuthana, also known as Satyakai, began measuring out the ground for the encampment. Their task was to ensure that the tents were pitched in a way that would maximize space and provide adequate protection for their troops. As the Pandavas' camp took shape, Krishna oversaw the setup of elaborate tents for the visiting kings who had come as allies. These structures were like palatial residences adorned with fuel, edibles, and drinks. Hundreds of skilled mechanics, surgeons, and physicians were on hand to cater to the needs of the army. In every pavilion, King Yudhishthira saw to it that an abundance of supplies was stockpiled. Bowstrings, bows, coats of mail, and a vast array of weapons lay piled high alongside. Ani clarified butter, pounded like water, fodder for cattle, chaff, coals, heavy machins, lances, batlexes, bow staves, breastplates, scimitars, and quivers. The air was thick with the smell of fuel and the sound of hammering on metals. News of the Pandavas' encampment spread. Their allies began to arrive, bringing with them their forces and animals. Many kings who had practiced brahmacharya vows, drunk, consecrated some, and made large offerings to Brahmanas at sacrifices, came to join Yudhishthira's army. They were drawn by the promise of victory and a chance to participate in a great battle that would determine the fate of their kingdom. The Kurukshetra landscape was alive with activity as thousands of soldiers, elephants, and horses converged on the Pandavas' camp. The air vibrated with anticipation, and the very earth seemed to tremble with the weight of expectation as the sun began to.
In the midst of the court, King Duryodhana's eyes burned with a fierce determination. He had just received news that Yudhishthira, the eldest son of Pandu, had marched his troops to Kurukshetra, eager for battle, protected by Vasudeva, aided by Virata and Drupada with their sons, and surrounded by hundreds of kings. The Pandavas were a formidable force. Duryodhana's face darkened as he addressed Karna, Dussasana, and Sakanite. Kesava has gone to the sons of Pritha. He growled, his voice dripping with venom, filled with wrath. He will surely stir up the Pandavas. He knew that a battle between the Kurus and the Pandavas was inevitable, and that Vasudeva would be at its center. Vamsna and Arjuna were already aligned with their uncle. Loud Yudhishthira was under the influence of his brother. Duryodhana's eyes flashed with anger as he recalled the past persecution of the Pandavas by him and his brothers. Before this, he spat, Yudhishthira and all his brothers were persecuted by me. Virata and Drupada, whom I had waged hostilities against, have now become leaders of Yudhishthira's army. He knew that the impending battle would be fierce and terrifying. With a cold smell, Duryodhana ordered Karna, Dussasana, and Sakanai to prepare for war. Let every preparation be made for the encounter, he commanded. Let the kings pitch their tents by hundreds and thousands on Kurukshetra, with spacious encampments protected from enemies, near water and fuel, and with unobstructed communication routes. He also ordered that the road from the Kuru city to the camp be made level for the march of his allies. As Duryodhana's words echoed through the court, his advisors nodded in agreement. So be it, they said, their voices firm and resolute. The next day dawned bright with promise as the high-souled warriors set out to fulfill their king's orders. They rose from their costly seats, their mask-like arms blazing with gold bracelets and fragrant pastes with lotus-like hands. They donned their headgears, lower and upper garments, and diverse ornaments. The foremost Kar warriors superintended the furnishing of their cars, while those conversant with horse lore harnessed their steeds. Those who knew elephants began to equip these massive animals for battle. The warriors armed themselves with beautiful gold-made armor and diverse weapons. The city of Duryodhana, filled with rejoicing millions, took on a festive aspect. The Kuru capital looked like the scene at the appearance of the moon with its.
In the midst of a gathering of kings, Yudhishthira, the wise and just ruler, turned to Krishna, his trusted friend and advisor. Krishna, he said, I have been thinking deeply about the words spoken by Duryodhana. He has accused us of being cowards and has refused to listen to reason or wisdom. His heart is filled with malice and deceit. What should we do in this situation? How can we fulfill our duty and protect our people? Krishna, his voice deep as thunder, replied. Duryodhana's words are like the rustling of leaves, empty and devoid of substance. He has no intention of listening to wisdom or virtue. His heart is consumed by greed and ambition. He relies on Karna and Sekanai, who fuel his wicked desires. Their advice is clouded by their own biases and prejudices. Yudhishthira looked at Krishna with a mixture of sadness and determination. Krishna, he said, I have heard the words of my mother Kunti and Vidya, our wise advisor. I know that they would never counsel us to abandon our principles or values. But what can we do in this situation? We cannot simply sit back and allow Duryodhana's wickedness to prevail. Krishna nodded his head in understanding. The time for war has come, he said. We must not be swayed by the opinions of those who would seek to undermine our values and principles. We must stand firm, just as a mountain stands firm against the raging storms. Our duty is clear. We must defend ourselves and our people against the forces of evil. As Krishna spoke, a great commotion arose among the Pandava army. The soldiers cheered and prepared for battle, their hearts filled with joy and determination. But Yudhishthira's expression turned somber as he gazed out at the impending slaughter. Krishna, he said, his voice trembling with emotion, I fear that we are being drawn into a great calamity. We have suffered so much already. Must we now face even greater hardship and loss? Arjuna, Yudhishthira's brother, stepped forward to calm his doubts. Krishna has spoken the truth, he said. We cannot turn back. Now our duty is clear. We must fight for what is right and just, no matter the cost. The night fell. The Pandava army settled in for a restless sleep, their hearts filled with anticipation and trepidation. They knew that tomorrow would bring great battle, and they steeled themselves for the challenges ahead. The next morning, Yudhishthira gave the order to draw up the troops in battle array. The sound of drums and trumpets echoed through the land as the Pandava army prepared to face their enemies. Krishna stood tall among them. As the night wore off, King Duryodhana stood on the battlefield, surveying his vast army. He had a grand plan in mind, and it was time to put it into action. Vaisampayana watched with great interest as the king began to distribute his 11 echelons of troops among their respective divisions. The sun beat down upon the earth as Duryodhana's men scurried about, haranguing themselves into three classes: superior, middling, and inferior. The king's strategy was clear. He would place his most skilled warriors in the van, his seasoned fighters in the center, and his raw recruits at the rear. As the army took shape, Vaisampayana marveled at the sheer variety of arms and armor on display. Each warrior was equipped with a specific set of tools for battle. Some carried long-handled spears, while others wielded short-pointed clubs or barbed javelins. The air was filled with the clanging of steel, the creaking of leather, and the rustling of fabric as the soldiers readied themselves for war. The king's cars, adorned with golden ornaments and emblazoned with the emblem of the Kaurava, stood proudly at the forefront of the army. Each vehicle was a marvel of engineering, fitted with timber and planks to repair any damage sustained in battle. The drivers, skilled warriors in their own right, were chosen for their bravery and expertise. As Vaisampayana watched, the elephants emerged from the rear, their massive bodies glistening with dew-kissed skin and adorned with rows of bells and pearls. 7 brave warriors rode, each beast armed to the teeth and ready to charge into battle at a moment's notice. Those steeds, too, were an impressive sight. Hundreds and thousands of them, ridden by skilled soldiers clad in mail and decked in ornaments. Each horse was well trained, obedient to its rider, and free from the habit of scratching the ground with its 4 hoofs. And then there were the foot soldiers, countless thousands of men, each armed with a specific set of weapons and armor. They stood at attention, their eyes fixed on the king as he surveyed his army. It was clear that Duryodhana had chosen his warriors carefully, selecting only the bravest and most skilled to lead his troops. The cure of a king's strategy was not just about numbers, it was about organization and discipline. He divided his army into smaller units, Sinus, Pritinus, and Vehinus, each with its own leader and specific role to play in the battle ahead. And at the heart of this machine was Duryodhana, himself a mighty-armed king who had spent years perfecting his craft. As the sun began to set on the eve of battle, Duryodhana stood before his most trusted generals. Kripa, Dronats. The sun was setting over the kingdom of Hastinapura, casting a golden glow over the bustling streets. In the midst of this vibrant scene, Duryodhana, Dhritarashtra's son, stood before Bhishma, his grandfather and revered leader, with joined hands and a determined look on his face. Duryodhana addressed Bhishma with words that echoed through the ages. Grandsire, he said, without a commander, even the mightiest army is like a swarm of ants, easily routed in battle. The intelligence of two persons can never agree, and different commanders are jealous of one another's prowess. We have heard of the ancient tale where the Brahmanas, led by their wise leaders, fought against the mighty Kshatriyas of the Hayaya clan. But despite being outnumbered, the Kshatriyas emerged victorious because they were united under a single commander, while the Brahmanas were divided and acted according to their individual understanding. Bhishma listened intently, his eyes twinkling with wisdom as he nodded in agreement. Duryodhana continued, we have heard that when the Brahmanas appointed one of their own as their leader, they succeeded in defeating the Kshatriyas. Thus, it is clear that a skilled and brave commander is essential for victory in battle. As Duryodhana spoke, his words were laced with a deep sense of longing and devotion. He gazed at Bhishma with an unwavering faith, as if to say, you are the one we need, grandsire. You are equal to Usanus himself, wise and just. We beg of you, be our commander. The air was heavy with anticipation as Duryodhana's words hung in the balance. Bhishma, however, hesitated for a moment before responding. His eyes clouded over and his voice took on a hint of sadness. My dear Duryodhana, he said, I am bound by my pledge to seek the good of both you and the Pandavas, and I must confess that there is one warrior who stands equal to me, Arjuna, the son of Kunti, but I fear that he will not fight with me openly. The scene shifted as Bhishma's words hung in the air. Duryodhana's face fell, and his eyes narrowed in determination. He knew that if Bhishma were to fight against him, it would be a battle unlike any other. Just then Karna, the Sota son, spoke up from the shadows. I shall never fight as long as Ganga's son lives, he said, his voice low and steady. After Bhishma is slain, I shall fight with the wielder of Gandhava. As the words hung in the air, a sudden stillness fell over the gathering. It was as if time itself. In the midst of preparations for the great battle that was to come, King Janamejayad sought to understand the reasons of his brothers and their allies when they heard about Bhishma's appointment as commander of the Kuru army. He asked Vaisampayana, a wise sage, to recount what Yudhishthira, the eldest Pandava brother, had said. In response, Vaisampayana began by describing how Yudhishthira, with his great intelligence and foresight, summoned all his brothers and their trusted allies, including Vasudeva Krishna. He instructed them to prepare for battle, donning their armor and selecting leaders for the 7 divisions of their army. Krishna himself endorsed this decision, emphasizing that it was a necessary step in the face of impending war. Yudhishthira and called upon the bravest warriors among his brothers to take charge of each division. Drupada, Virata, Drishtadyumna, King Trishtaketu, Prince Shekindai, and Sahadeva. Above them all was placed Trishtadyumna, who had emerged from the sacred fire like a blazing star. Arjuna, with his unwavering spirit, was appointed leader of these high-souled warriors, while Krishna, endued with great intelligence, was chosen as their guide and steed-driver. Just then a procession of mighty warriors from the Vrishai clan arrived at the Pandava camp. They were led by Haliuta, accompanied by Akrura, Yadasama, Uddhava, Pradyumna, Adhoka's sons Chirushna, and others. The air was filled with their presence, as if a herd of mighty Tejas had descended upon the camp. The mighty armed warrior emerged from this group, his eyes aglow like the peak of Mount Kailasas. He entered the Pandava encampment. All the kings rose to greet him, offering worship and veneration. King Yudhishthira himself touched Rama's hands in respect, and the two exchanged words of affection. Rama then spoke to the assembly, his voice filled with a sense of foreboding. This fierce battle is inevitable, he said. It is a decree of fate that cannot be averted. I hope to see all of you emerge from this strife unscathed, with sound bodies and perfectly held. He expressed his concern, for the Kshatriyas gathered on both sides, knowing that their hour had come. A great melee was sure to ensue, leaving behind a mire of flesh and blood. Then revealed his own thoughts about Krishna's devotion to the Pandavas, cause Vasudeva has devoted himself entirely to your side. He said, I dare not cast my eyes on the world without Krishna by my. In the midst of a bustling Pandava camp, a majestic figure emerged from the horizon. Vasampada's words echoed through the air as he introduced Bhishmaka's son Rukmai, a warrior renowned for his unwavering resolve and unshakable courage, born to King Hiranyavarman, a close friend of Indra, and hailing from the illustrious lineage of Bodhya. Rukmai had been trained in the art of warfare by the wise Drona, who dwelled on the majestic mountains of Gandham, and Rukmi's prowess with arms was unmatched, having mastered the 4 divisions of the science of weapons. He possessed the celestial bow Vijaya, a gift from Indra, whose energy rivaled that of Gandhava and Saranga. These 3 bows were among the most revered in the heavens, wielded by Varuna, Indra, and Vishnu respectively. Rukmi's own prowess had earned him the privilege of wielding Vijaya, which he obtained from Dronas. Rukmai entered the Pandava camp with an extraordinary of troops. His arrival sent ripples of awe throughout the assembly. King Yudhishthira, advancing a few steps, offered him worship and due reverence. The Pandavas welcomed Rukmai warmly, and he rested for a while among them. However, as Rukmai addressed Arjuna in the midst of the gathering, his words were laced with an air of challenge. He boasted that no one could match his prowess in battle, vowing to slay Drona, Kripa, Bhishma, and even Karna on behalf of the Pandavas. His offer was met with a mixture of surprise and amusement by Arjuna, who smiled kindly as he rejected Rukmi's proposal. You born into the noble lineage of Kuru, claiming Drona as your preceptor, having Vasudeva as your Ole, and wielding Gandhava. How can you say that you are afraid? Arjuna asked with a hint of mirth. When I fought against the mighty Gandharvas, or battled against the gods and Danavas at Kandava, who was my Ole, then when I faced the Navatekavakas and Galakyas, who stood by Arjuna's words, left Rukma speechless, his boast deflated by the prince's unwavering confidence. As he took leave of the Pandavas, Rukma retreated to Duryodhana's camp, where he repeated his offer in vain. The king, prideful and dismissive, rejected Rukma, just as Arjuna had thus 2 mighty warriors. Rama of Vrishni's race and King Rukmai withdrew from the battle, leaving the Pandavas to their deliberations once more as the sun rose over the vast expanse of Kurukshetra. The armies of the Kauravas and Pandavas stood arrayed in battle formation. The air was electric with tension as the 2 sides faced off against each other. Janamejaya, a wise and just ruler, looked on with concern, his mind racing with questions about the impending conflict. Sanjaya, he called out to his trusted advisor, what did the Kauravas do after their soldiers were arrayed in battle? Were they not aware of the fate that awaited them? Janamejaya's eyes seemed to bore into Sanjaya's very soul as he sought answers to the questions that had been plaguing him. Sanjaya, a sage and learned Brahmana, took a deep breath before responding. O king, he began, after the soldiers were arrayed in battle, Dhritarashtra, your father spoke to me with great concern. Sanjaya's voice was low and measured, but it conveyed a sense of urgency that was palpable. Dhritarashtra, the blind king, sat on his throne, his face twisted in anguish. Sanjaya, he said, his voice cracking with emotion, tell me everything about what has transpired within our camps. I know that war is a terrible thing, and that it will bring only ruin and destruction. But my son Duryodhana is consumed by his own desires and ambitions. He sees deceit as wisdom and gambling as the key to success. I fear for his soul. Sanjaya nodded sympathetically, his eyes filled with compassion. I understand your concerns, O king, he said gently, but perhaps you should not place all the blame on Duryodhana alone. There are those who would say that we reap what we sow and that our actions have consequences. Perhaps it is time for us to reflect on our own choices and their impact on the world around us. Dhritarashtra's face fell as he listened to Sanjaya's words. He knew that his son was flawed, but he had always hoped that Duryodhana would change. Now, as the armies prepared for battle, Dhritarashtra felt a sense of despair wash over him. Sanjaya continued to speak, his voice a steady stream of wisdom and insight. O king, it is said that those who perpetrate evil deeds should never blame fate or the gods. Rather, they should take responsibility for their actions, and so I must tell you that the sons of Pandu have borne their injuries with patience and dignity, despite the provocations of your son Sanjaya. Spoke the sound of drums and cymbals echoed through the air, signaling the start of the battle. The armies clashed in a frenzy of steel and dust, their cries and shouts mingling with the thunder of hooves. In the midst of the Kurukshetra, war king Duryodhana summoned his trusted advisors Karna, Dasasana, and Sakanai to discuss their strategy against the Pandavas. He had already consulted with Karna, and now he wanted to hear their collective thoughts. As they deliberated, Duryodhana's mind turned to Uluka, a skilled diplomat who had previously served as his emissary to the Pandavas. Summoning Uluka into his private chambers, Duryodhana entrusted him with a secret message for Yudhishthira and Vasudeva. Uluka, he said, "Go to the Pandavas and convey my words to them. The time has come for us to put an end to this long-standing enmity between our houses. Remember those boastful words you uttered with Vasudeva and your brothers. It is time to make good on those boasts." Suluk listened intently as Duryodhana continued to tell Yudhishthira, "I have come to realize the error of my ways. As a Kshatriya, it is my duty to protect my people and uphold Dharma. Why, in my arrogance, I have sought to destroy the Pandavas and usurp their rightful place as rulers. Now I urge you all to stand by your word and fulfill your promises." Duryodhana then shared with Uluka a parable he had heard from Narada about a wicked cat that pretended to be a holy ascetic on the banks of the Ganges. The cat's hypocrisy was eventually exposed when it began to devour its own friends and family, who had come to rely on its protection. As Uluka listened to the story, Duryodhana's words took on a new meaning. Just as that cat wore a mask of piety while secretly plotting against his own kin, he said, so too have I pretended to be a righteous king while secretly seeking to destroy my enemies. It is time for me to this hypocrisy and live up to the ideals of a true Kshatriya. Duryodhana's message to Uluka was clear. He wanted the Pandavas to know that he was no longer content with simply scheming against them. It was time for battle. He urged Yudhishthira to remember his own boasts and to stand by his word just as a Kshatriya should. As Uluka departed, Duryodhana's words echoed in his mind, "Tell Vasudeva that I expect him to stand against me in battle, not out of loyalty to the Pandavas, but for his own sake and for the good of the Pandavas. Let us see who will emerge victorious from this conflict." With Uluka on his way to convey Duryodhana's message to the Pandavas, the stage was set for the epic battle that would. The sun was setting over the Pandava camp, casting a golden glow over the gathered warriors. Uluka, the gambler's son, stood before Yudhishthira, his eyes fixed on the king as he began to speak. "Thou art fully conversant with what envoys say, O Yudhishthira," Uluka said, his voice steady and confident. "Behoveth thee not therefore to be angry with me, if I repeat those words only which Duryodhana hath instructed me to tell." Yudhishthira's expression remained calm, but a hint of curiosity flickered in his eyes. He nodded for Uluka to continue. Uluka took a deep breath before launching into a fiery speech, his words dripping with disdain and mockery. "The word defeated at Tist, and Krishna was brought into the assembly. At this a person who regardeth himself a man would be justified in giving way to wrath." As he spoke, Uluka's voice rose echoing through the camp. He painted a vivid picture of the Pandavas' exile, their humiliation, and their suffering for 12 years' word. "The banished from home into the woods, for 1 whole year didst thou live in Vira's service." Uluka paused for a moment, surveying the gathered warriors before fixing his gaze on Yudhishthira. Once more his words dripped with sarcasm as he continued to mock the Pandavas' weakness and Krishna's influence over them. "Remembering the reason there is for wrath, the exile and the persecution of Krishna, be a man, O son of Pandu, the weak them. Yet, O Pandava, made a vow, let him, if able, drink the blood of Dasasana." Uluka's words were like a whip lashing out at the Pandavas' pride and their very sense of identity. He ridiculed their boasts and their claims to be mighty warriors without having yet approached Bhishma in battle. "Why dost thou indulge in boasts, like a fool that boasteth of his intention to ascend the mountains of Gandhamadana? Thou, O son of Kantai, art indulging in a vain boast." Uluka's speech reached its climax as he described the assembled army of the Kuras, their numbers and strength overwhelming a preceptor in both the Vedas and the Bhau. He hath reached the end of both these branches of learning, who is there fond of life, fighting from the back of an elephant or of a horse or from a car that would return home safe and sound after having encountered that grandeur of foes. Uluka Finished speaking, the camp fell silent. The warriors exchanged uneasy glances. Their faces, pale with fear, Yudhishthira's expression remained calm, but his eyes narrowed slightly as the sun beat down on the assembly grounds, casting a golden glow over the gathering of kings. Sanjaya, the narrator, stood before King Dhritarashtra, recounting the events that had unfolded in the presence of Krishna and the Pandavas. As he spoke, the same came alive in his words. Yudhishthira, the messenger sent by Duryodhana, had once again repeated the provocative words that had been spoken earlier. The Pandavas, already enraged, were now on the verge of boiling over. Vema, his face twisted in a snarl, glared at Krishna with eyes blazing like hot coals. "You have heard our words, Yudhishthira," Vema growled, his voice low and menacing. "Now go back to Duryodhana and tell him that we will not be provoked into battle without a fight. I swear on my honor as a Kshatriya that I will slay you and your brothers. Tomorrow the sea may break its bounds, the mountains may shudder, but my words will never be false." The assembly erupted in a chorus of anger and indignation. Sahadeva, his eyes red with rage, spoke up next, his voice dripping with venom. "You are an embodiment of quarrel, Yudhishthira, born to destroy our family and bring ruin upon the world. Your father has always sought to do us harm, and I will not rest until he is punished." Krishna, ever the peacemaker, intervened, his words soft but firm. "My dear brother, let us not address Yudhishthira harshly. He is only doing what he was instructed to say." But Bhima's anger was too far gone, and he turned to his allies, his voice dripping with contempt. "You have heard the insults hurled at Vasudeva and myself," he said, "but through Krishna's might and your bravery, I know we will emerge victorious. When tomorrow comes, I will face Duryodhana and his brothers on the battlefield, and my Gandhava will speak for me." The assembly erupted in cheers and applause, with King Yudhishthira rising to address Yudhishthira. "No good king should patiently bear an insult," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I have listened to your words, Yudhishthira, and now I will tell you what my reply is." Yudhishthira repeated the words of Duryodhana, and Yudhishthira's eyes flashed with anger. His massive arms flexed as he spoke, his voice laced with both mildness and vigor. "Go, Yudhishthira," he said to the messenger, "tell Duryodhana that I will not be provoked into battle without a fight. Be a Kshatriya, Duryodhana, and summon your foes to battle." If you dare. The assembly fell silent as Yudhishthira departed, carrying the words of the Pandavas back.
The sun had set over the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the assembled warriors. Sanjaya, a wise and learned sage, stood before them, his eyes fixed on Duryodhana, the eldest son of Dhritarashtra. Duryodhana's words still echoed in their minds, boastful claims of victory and invincibility. Yudhishthira, another great warrior, stepped forward, his eyes blazing with a fire's intensity. He gazed at Duryodhana with contempt, his voice dripping with disdain. "You who rely on the strength of others, summoning your foes to battle, are not men," he declared, "but one who stands alone, relying on their own courage and prowess, is truly worthy of respect." Yudhishthira's words cut deep into Duryodhana's pride, but he refused to back down. He retorted with a boastful claim that Bhishma, the great-grandsire of the Kurus, would lead his army to victory against the Pandavas. Yudhishthira lauded the saying, "I will slay Bhishma, first in front of all the bowmen, and relying on whose strength you think you can conquer us." The assembled warriors listened intently as Yudhishthira continued to speak, his words dripping with scorn for Duryodhana's arrogance. He told him that after Bhishma and Drona were defeated, he would be left alone without hope or kingdom. Mesna, the strongest of the Pandavas, then stepped forward, his voice thundered through the air as he vowed to slay Dasasana in battle and smash his own thighs. "I will quaff his lifeblood," he declared, "and you, O Sayatana, will be left hopeless of life, kingdom, and sons." Nakula, the swift and agile warrior, spoke next, saying that all the words uttered by Duryodhana had been heard and understood. He vowed to do as commanded, but his tone was laced with a hint of sadness. Sahadeva, the wise and gentle one, also spoke, warning Duryodhana that he would have to repent along with his children, kinsmen, and counselors for their boastful claims. Sairata and Drupada, two venerable leaders, then added their voices, saying it was their wish to become slaves of a virtuous person, whether they were masters or slaves would be known tomorrow as also who own what mammon. And the young warrior spoke next his words laced with a fierce determination. He vowed to slay Bhishma from his car, relying upon whose prowess Duryodhana was certain of success in battle. Drishtadyumna, the brave and loyal warrior, also spoke, saying he would slay Drona with all his.
As Sanjaya stood by, he watched Yudhishthira, the son of Kunti, respond to Udyoga's words. The prince's eyes blazed with determination as he rallied his army led by Drishtadyumna and others, the vast force comprising 4 kinds of warriors: foot soldiers, elephants, chariots, and cavalry. Was a marvel to behold. Its sheer size and strength seemed almost invincible. Like the stillness of the ocean, at its forefront stood Drishtadyumna, the prince of Panchala, his mighty bow at the ready. His eyes gleamed with a fierce intensity as he surveyed his troops, seeking the perfect opponents for each warrior. He called out to his car warriors, assigning them their tasks according to their strength and courage. With a wave of his hand, he paired Arjuna against Karna, the Suta's son Memma against Duryodhana, and so on. As the sun beat down upon the battlefield, Drishtadyumna continued to strategize, pitting each warrior against their most formidable foe. He placed Sikandin at the vanguard, sending him against the mighty Bhishma. Sahadeva was urged forward against Sekine, while Chekitana faced off against Sala. The 5 sons of Draupadi were arrayed against the Trigartas, and Suvadra's son of Abhimanyu was paired against Vrishesna. Karna's son Drishtadyumna saved the most skilled warriors for himself, reserving Drona, the revered teacher, for his own share. As he finished his arrangements, a sense of anticipation hung in the air. The mighty Balman, his face aglow with determination, waited for battle to begin. His troops arrayed before him like a vast sea of steel and armor, seemed ready to conquer all that stood in their way. The leader of leaders, Drishtadyumna, stood firm, his heart unshakable as he awaited the clash of steel on steel. With a collected mind, he gazed out upon the battlefield, his eyes fixed on the prize of victory. For the sons of Pandu, the air was heavy with tension, but Drishtadyumna's confidence was unwavering. He knew that this battle would be one to remember, a clash of titans that would decide the fight of kingdoms and heroes alike. The waiting began. The warriors on both sides seemed frozen in anticipation. Would the Pandavas emerge victorious, or would their foes prove too strong? Only time would tell. But for now, Drishtadyumna stood at the forefront of his army, ready to face whatever lay ahead, his bow at the ready. He waited for the signal to begin, a moment that would change the course of his story forever. The sun was setting over the kingdom of Hastinapura as Dhritarashtra, the blind king, sat on his throne, reflecting on the events that had transpired. His mind wandered back to the day when Falguni, a young warrior from the Pandava clan, had vowed to slay Bhishma in battle. The thought sent shivers down his spine. Just then Dhritarashtra's thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of Sanjaya, his trusted advisor and charioteer. "Tell me, Sanjaya," the king said, his voice laced with concern, "what did my wicked sons do after Falguni vowed to slay Bhishma?" Sanjaya bowed his head in respect before beginning to recount the tale. "Your Majesty, after hearing of Falguni's vow, your sons, led by Duryodhana, were overjoyed. They knew that with Bhishma as their commander, they would be invincible on the battlefield." Dhritarashtra's eyes widened in surprise as Sanjaya continued his tale. Bhishma, the son of Santan, was summoned to take command of the army. He accepted the challenge and addressed Duryodhana with words that gladdened the young prince's heart. With a flourish, Bhishma began to speak. "I, Ganga's son, shall lead your army today. I am well versed in all matters of war and military strategy. I know how to array our troops and engage the enemy. With my guidance, we will surely emerge victorious." Duryodhana's face lit up with excitement as he listened to Bhishma's words. "I have no fear from even the gods and Asuras combined," he declared. "With you at the helm, grandfather, and Drona by our side, victory is assured." Bhishma smiled, pleased with Duryodhana's confidence. "I shall lead your troops to victory, my prince, and I shall name those who will be counted among the Rathas and Atirathas, the bravest warriors in our army." As Bhishma began to enumerate the names of the leading warriors, Dhritarashtra listened intently. He was amazed by the sheer number of skilled fighters at his disposal. Firstly, Bhishma said, "You yourself are a Ratha, Duryodhana, your brothers including Dasisana are also among the Rathas. Dhritarashtra's eyes widened as he listened to Bhishma's words. He was proud of his sons and their accomplishments in battle. Bhishma continued to name the leading warriors, each one more impressive than the last. Kritavarman, the Bhoja chief, isn't that Tirtha, he said. He will accomplish our purpose in battle, destroying the ranks of the foe. The sun beat down upon the vast battlefield, casting a golden glow over the assembled armies of the Kauravas. Bhishma, the venerable warrior, and Strategist stood atop his chariot, surveying the landscape with a discerning eye. His gaze fell upon Sadakshina, the ruler of the Kambodjas, who rode at the forefront of his army. Behold, O king, Bhishma declared to Duryodhana, Sadakshina is a warrior equal to a single Ratha. He will undoubtedly fight with valor, and his prowess in battle will be akin to that of Indra himself. As Bhishma spoke, the Kambodjas' chariot army began to move into position, their armor glinting like a swarm of locusts. In the sunlighted Duryodhana's right rode Nila, clad in blue mail and leading his own chariot army from Maheshmati. His eyes narrowed as he gazed out at the enemy lions, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. He had long-standing hostilities with Sahadeva, and his desire for battle was palpable. Meanwhile, Vinda and Anuvinda, princes of Avanti, were preparing to charge into the fray. Their chariots were adorned with intricate carvings, and their warriors were armed with masses, birded darts, swords, and long shafts. Like two mighty elephant leaders, they would soon range the battlefield, seeking out their enemies. To vanquish the 5 brothers of Trigarta, born in the city of Virata, were another force to be reckoned with. Their leader Satyratha was a skilled warrior who had once clashed with Bhima, son of Pandu, now driven by a desire for revenge. They would charge into battle like Makaras, agitating the waters of the Ganges as the armies clashed. Duryodhana's own sons, Lakshmana and Dasisana, rode forth to join the fray. These 2 princes were unyielding in their determination to fight, their youth and agility making them formidable opponents. On the battlefield, Bhishma continued his assessment of the Kaurava army, pointing out other noble warriors who would soon take to the field. There was Dandadhara, equal to a single Ratha, King Vryabhala, ruler of the Kosalas, whose prowess with the bow was unmatched, and Kripa, son of Saradwat, who had been born in a clump of heath and was said to be invincible like Kartikya himself. As the battle raged on, these warriors would soon prove themselves to be among the most skilled and feared on the field. Their valor and strength would be tested against the armies of the Pandavas, and only time would tell who would emerge victorious in this epic struggle. The sun was setting over the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the assembled warriors. Bhishma, the venerable grandsire of the Pandavas, stood tall on his chariot, surveying the enemy lines with a discerning eye. He gazed out at the sea of faces, each one a formidable warrior in their own right. Your maternal uncle Sakanite, he said to King Duryodhana, is a force to be reckoned with. Like a single Ratha, he will lead the charge into battle, his troops unstoppable as they rush forward. His son Aswathaman, that mighty Balman, is a Mahabharata of unparalleled skill and prowess. He can consume the 3 worlds if he wishes. Bhishma's words were laced with a hint of warning, for even he knew that Aswathaman's greatest weakness was his love of life. Despite his formidable abilities, he was not immune to fear or hesitation, and Bhishma had no doubt that this would prove to be his downfall. But there were others on the battlefield who did not share Aswathaman's frailties. Drama, the venerable preceptor, was a force to be reckoned with, his energy undiminished by age. He would fight with unyielding ferocity, consuming Yudhishthira's troops like dry grass in a fire. And then there were the other Maharajas, each one a giant among men. Vryabhala, prince of Panchala, was a single Ratha capable of roaming the battlefield like death himself. His troops, armed with diverse kinds of mail and weapons, would slay all who opposed them. Vrishesna, son of Kara, was another formidable warrior, his energy and strength unmatched by any on the field. Jasanda, born in Mada's race, was a Ratha of unyielding ferocity, prepared to cast away his very life for the sake of battle. As Bhishma spoke, his words painted vivid pictures of each warrior, their strengths and weaknesses laid bare like a tapestry on display. And yet, despite the many formidable foes arrayed against them, he could not help but feel a twinge of admiration for one among them, Amanjaya, the son of Pandu, who had earned the respect and affection of his preceptor. For in this great battle, it was clear that more than just physical prowess would be required to emerge victorious. The hearts and minds of the warriors on both sides would play a crucial role, and Bhishma knew that only time would tell which side would ultimately prevail. The sun was setting over the bustling camp of the Kauravas, casting a warm orange glow over the gathering of warriors. Bhishma, the venerable grandsire, stood tall and majestic, his eyes gleaming with wisdom as he addressed the assembly. Both Akela and Vrisha, or rather he declared, invincible in battle. Their strength is matched only by their courage. But there is one among you who boasts of his prowess, yet falls short of true greatness. Bhishma's gaze fell upon Karna, the son of Shrikarna. Thou art neither a Ratha nor an Attira, the Bhishma said, his voice firm, but tinged with sorrow. The natural coat of mail hath been taken from thee, and these celestial earrings lost. Thou hast been cursed by Rima, the son of Jamadagni, by a Brahmana, who saw fit to deprive thee of the battle at Kafram. Karna's eyes blazed with rage as he heard Bhishma's words. How can you speak thus, O grandsire? He thundered, his voice like a stormy tempest. I am innocent, yet you malign me at every turn. You regard me as worthless, as if I were a coward. Bhishma stood calm and unyielding in the face of Karna's anger. I speak not out of malice, he said, but out of sorrow. Thou art but half a Ratha, Karna, for thou hast been deprived of thy true strength. Drona, the renowned preceptor, spoke up in agreement with Bhishma. Is even so as thou hast said, O grandsire, he declared. Karna boasteth much, yet he falleth short in battle. Karna's anger boiled over, and he launched a scathing attack on Bhishma, his words sharp as knives. You are but an old man, he spat, your vision clouded by years and experience. You see the world through narrow eyes and regard me as worthless. But Bhishma stood firm, his heart unmoved by Karna's insults. I speak not out of malice, he repeated, but out of sorrow for thee. Karna, thou art but half, or rather, and thee boasts are but empty words. King Duryodhana, the leader of the Kauravas, intervened in the midst of the argument. Cast thine eyes upon me, O Dana's son, he said to Bhishma, his voice filled with urgency. The hour of battle draws near, and I must know the strength and weakness of my foes. Bhishma's gaze turned to Duryodhana, and for a moment the two men locked eyes in understanding. Then, in the midst of a battle-scared landscape, Bhishma stood tall, his words carrying like thunder across the field. He addressed King Dhritarashtra, recounting the tale of the Raz among the Pandavas. O king, Bhishma began, I have revealed to you the distinction between the Rathas and Attirathas in your own army. Now listen as I speak of the mighty warriors who bear this title among the sons of Pandu. His eyes gleamed with a deep understanding as he continued. The king himself, Arjuna, is a Ratha, par excellence, like a blazing fire. He will cut through the battlefield, leaving none unscathed in his path. Bhishma's gaze shifted to Bhima, who stood like an untamed force on the field. The son of Madri, Bhishma declared, is equal to 8 Rathas combined. His strength is that of 10,000 elephants, and his energy knows no bounds. The other Pandavas, Nakula and Sahadeva, were also Ratha warriors. Their prowess in battle a testament to their unwavering courage is. Bhishma spoke. The very atmosphere seemed to shift. The Pandava brothers, each one a towering figure of strength and valor, stood before him like living deities. Their eyes burned with an inner fire, their faces set like granite as they prepared for the battles ahead. Bhima's mighty roar echoed through the landscape as if the earth itself was responding to his presence. His mask, a symbol of unyielding power, seemed to tremble in his grasp, ready to shatter any foe that dared oppose him. The other Pandavas stood like giants beside him, their faces aglow with an inner light. Bhishma's words painted vivid pictures of the Pandava warriors, each one a master of his craft. Arjuna, with his celestial Bhagandava and his impenetrable coat of mail, was a force to be reckoned with on the battlefield. His charioteer Vasudeva stood beside him like an extension of his own being. As Bhishma spoke of their prowess in battle, the Kaurava army seemed to shrink before them. No warrior among the Kauravas could match the might of these Pandavas. Even Drona and Bhishma himself, 2 of the greatest warriors on the field, knew that they were no match for Arjuna's skill. The king listened in awe as Bhishma recounted the tale of the Rajasuya sacrifice, where the Pandavas had vanquished kings with ease. Their valor was a testament to their unwavering dedication to duty and their unshakable commitment to justice. As Bhishma finished speaking, the landscape seemed to grow darker, as if the very shadows themselves were retreating before the might of the sun beat down upon the vast expanse of the battlefield. As Bhishma, the venerable warrior, stood tall amidst the throng of kings, his eyes, like 2 piercing stars, shone with a deep understanding of the warriors who would soon clash in the great war. All the 5 sons of Draupadi, he declared to King Duryodhana, his voice carrying across the landscape of Mahabharata's mighty and skilled in the art of war. Bhishma's gaze swept across the assembled army, his eyes lingering on each warrior as if weighing their metal utter. Son of Virata, he said, his voice filled with admiration, is one of the foremost, rather a true leader among leaders. His words were like a gentle breeze rustling the leaves of a great tree, and the young prince's face lit up with pride. But Bhishma's attention soon turned to another warrior of Amini, son of Arjuna, that slayer of foes. He said, his voice filled with awe, is equally in battle to Partha himself or Vasudeva, as if drawn by an unseen force. The mighty arm of Amini stepped forward, his eyes shining with a fire's light. Bhishma continued, endued with great lightness of hand in shooting weapons and acquainted with all the modes of warfare. He is possessed of great energy and is steady in the observance of vows. Bhishma's words painted a vivid picture of Abhimanyu's prowess on the battlefield, but they also spoke of his heart. Remembering the sufferings of his own father, Bhishma said he will put forth his prowess. The young warrior's determination was palpable, and it seemed as if the very gods themselves had ordained him for greatness. As Bhishma continued to speak, his words wove a tapestry of heroes, each one more magnificent than the last. There was Satyaki, the brave son of Madhu, whose great wrath and dauntlessness made him a force to be reckoned with on the battlefield. And then there were Utamanyu and Utmaljas, both mighty car warriors who owned many thousands of horses, elephants, and chariots. Together these warriors would unite with the Pandavas, their hearts afire with loyalty and devotion to Kuntai's sons. Like a raging fire or a tempestuous wind, they would sweep through the enemy ranks, challenging the bravest warriors to stand against them. Bhishma's words painted a vivid picture of the carnage that would soon ensue. But he spoke not of fear or doubt, only of the unyielding resolve of these mighty heroes. And then there were the two old kings, Virata and Drupada, who had lived long lives, filled with honor and virtue. The sun was setting over the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the assembled warriors. Bhishma, the venerable commander-in-chief of the Kaurava army, stood tall, his eyes scanning the ranks of the Pandavas. He began to speak, his voice carrying across the fields. Icandon, son of Drupada, is one of the finest Rathas among Yudhishthira's warriors. Bhishma declared he has shed his former life and will fight with great valor in this battle. His army is vast, comprising Anchalas and Prahadrakas, all eager to follow him into battle. With such a formidable force at his command, he will achieve greatness and earn fame among our troops. Bhishma's gaze turned to Trishtadyumna, the leader of the Pandava army. He is an Attira, the Bhishma said with conviction. His car warrior skills are unmatched, and he will single-handedly sweep across the battlefield like a raging Panika, bearing the gods themselves in its fury. Bhishma's eyes narrowed as he considered Kshatrat Arman, Trishtadyumna's son. He is only half, or rather, Bhishma said gently, due to his youth and lack of experience in battle. But then his gaze turned to the mighty Bauman who stood among the Pandavas. Trishtakyu, the heroid son of Sisuvala, is a Mahabharata. Bhishma declared he will fight with his father, achieving feats that even the greatest warriors would find difficult to match. Kshatrideva, another brave warrior, was also one of the finest Rathas among the Pandavas. Bhishma continued to speak, his words painted a vivid picture of the warriors who stood before him. Janta and Amitojas, both Maharathas, were like furious elephants in battle. Aja and Bojya, two brothers of great prowess, would fight with unmatched might for the Pandavas. The five Kshatriya brothers, Kesek, Sukimura, Nile, Shriadatta, and Sanka, were all formidable Rathas, their blood-red banners a testament to their bravery. Vardachimai was also a Maharatha, as was King Chitrayuta. Bhishma's words came to an end, but the picture he had painted of the Pandava warriors would stay with him forever. Chekadina and Satyadrita were two of the finest Rathas among the Pandavas, while Vaivradatta and Chandrasen were also, without doubt, some of the greatest warriors in the battles. The sun dipped below the horizon. Bhishma's words hung in the air, a testament to the bravery and skill that would be. The sun was setting over the vast expanse of the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the assembled warriors. Bhishma, the venerable grandsire of the Pandavas, stood tall, his eyes scanning the ranks. As he began to speak, "O great king," he said, addressing Duryodhana, "I must tell you about another mighty warrior who will soon take the field. Rakaman is a Maharatha, one of the greatest warriors in the service of the Pandavas. He will fight with the ferocity of a second god, his bow singing its deadly song as he takes on the enemy." Bhishma's gaze turned to Kuntavoja, the Meteorolon Kulavima, a man of great strength and prowess. This mighty bowman is an Attiratha. Bhishma declared He has mastered all forms of warfare and is well versed in the art of combat. His skills are matched only by those of Indra. Himself, the king of the gods, as Bhishma spoke, his eyes seemed to gleam with a fire's light. He was recounting the names of the great warriors who would soon take up arms against the Kauravas. Ghatotkacha, the prince of Rakshasas and son of Hedima, is another leader among them. He said, born of Bema and blessed with powers of illusion, he will fight with a ferocity that will be feared by all who oppose him. Bhishma's voice grew more measured as he spoke of Vasudeva and Arjuna, the two great warriors who stood at the forefront of the Pandava army. These two are like the sun and moon together in the evening. He said, their prowess is unmatched, their skills honed to perfection by years of training and battle. As Bhishma finished speaking, Duryodhana's eyes narrowed. He knew that his own warriors were no match for these mighty opponents. But Bhishma was not yet done. He turned to the Kaurava king and said, I will fight against all who oppose me, but there is one whom I will not strike or slay. Sikhandan, the prince of Panchalas. Bhishma's eyes seemed to cloud over as he spoke of his vow. I gave up the kingdom that was mine by right, he said. I lived in the observance of the Brahmacharya vow, and I installed Chitrangada on the throne of the Kauravas. I nullified my vow among all the kings of the earth, and I will not slay a woman or one who was once a woman. Duryodhana's face fell as he realized that Bhishma would not fight against Sikhandan. He knew that his own warriors were doomed to defeat unless they could find a way to break Vish. The sun was setting over the land as Duryodhana approached Bhishma. His grandfather, the young prince's eyes burned with curiosity and concern. For what reason, O chief of the Bharatas, he asked, wilt thou not slay Sikhandan, even if thou beholdest him approach thee as a foe with arms upraised? Bhishma, the venerable grandsire, looked at Duryodhana with a hint of nostalgia in his eyes. He began to tell the story of how it all started, of his father Santanu, the great king of the Kuras, who had left behind a legacy of virtue and wisdom. Bhishma remembered the day he installed his brother Chitrangada on the throne after their father's passing. Later, when Chitrangada died, Bhishma followed the counsel of Satyavati, his stepbrother, and installed Vichitravirya as king. As a devoted uncle, Bhishma had set out to find suitable brides for Vichitravirya, who was still young and inexperienced in the ways of kingship. He heard that 3 beautiful maidens from the kingdom of Kesai were about to choose their husbands from among the assembled kings. Amad, the eldest, Amika, the second, and Amalika, the youngest, had all been invited to participate in this grand ceremony. Bhishma remembered driving his single chariot to the city of Kesai, where he saw the 3 maidens adorned with precious ornaments, surrounded by the assembled kings. He challenged them all to a battle, taunting them that they were powerless to stop him from taking the maidens by force. With a fierce cry, Bhishma leaped into action, drawing his bow and firing arrow after arrow at the approaching chariots. As the kings unsheathed their swords, Bhishma unleashed a storm of arrows, cutting down their standards and vanquishing their steeds, elephants, and cart drivers. With the ease the battle raged on. But in the end it was Bhishma who emerged victorious, having single-handedly defeated all the assembled kings. As Duryodhana listened to his grandfather's tale, he watched as the old warrior's eyes seemed to gaze into the past, reliving the thrill of that epic battle. And so Bhishma concluded, I came back to Hastinapura, victorious, but also wiser. I made over the maidens to Satyavati, intending them for my brothers, and told her everything that had transpired. Duryodhana's eyes widened as he grasped the significance of his grandfather's story. He realized why Bhishma, despite his formidable prowess on the battlefield, would not slay Sikhandan. It was because of a promise made long ago, a debt to nature and to his family, that had shaped the course of his. In the midst of a grand victory, Bhishma, the stalwart warrior and chief of the Bharatas, stood before his mother Satyavati, her eyes brimming with tears. He had just returned from vanquishing the kings of Kesai, their daughters, renowned for their beauty. Now under his protection as brides for Vichitravirya, the ruler of Hastinapura, as Bhishma approached his mother, he bowed low in respect, his words tumbling forth like a river. Mother, I have triumphed over all the kings, and these daughters of the ruler of Kesai, with their beauty as Durai, have been brought to us for Vichitravirya's sake. Satyavati's eye shone with joy, her voice trembling as she replied, by good fortune, my child, that you have emerged victorious. The nuptials were soon to take place, and Bhishma was to play a crucial role in the ceremony. But just as the preparations were underway, one of the daughters of the ruler of Kesai approached him with a mixture of bashfulness and determination etched on her face. Bhishma, you are well versed in morality and scriptures, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You must do what is right. I have already chosen the ruler of Salwood as my lord before meeting you, and he has also expressed his desire for me in secret. How can you, born into the noble Kuru dynasty, transgress moral laws and keep me against my will? Bhishma listened intently to her words, his mind racing with the implications. He knew that he had to make a decision that would be just and fair. The maiden's eyes pleaded with him, her voice cracking as she spoke of the ruler of Salwa waiting for her in the distance. Please, Bhishma, have mercy on me, she implored. You are known throughout the land for your devotion to truth. Grant me permission to leave and be reunited with my chosen lord. In the midst of war-torn Hastinapura, Bhishma, a revered warrior, found himself in a predicament. He had taken Amba, the eldest daughter of the ruler of Kesai, as his prize after defeating her father and other kings in battle. However, he soon realized that he could not keep her as his own, for she was betrothed to another with a heavy heart. Ishma approached his mother Gandavati and their council of wise men, seeking guidance on what to do with the maiden. Ishma's solution was to send Amba to the city of Salwood, where her father had intended for her to be wedded. He accompanied her along with a group of elderly Brahmanas and her nurse as they traveled through treacherous terrain. As they arrived at Salwa city, Amba, still reeling from the trauma of being taken by force, mustered the courage to approach King Salwa, tears in her eyes and a tremble in her voice. Amba poured out her heart to the king, begging him to accept her as his own. She told him that she had never been cheerful when Bhishma took her away, but rather wept uncontrollably as he forcibly led her away from her family. She swore by her soul that she had always desired King Salwa, and as she came to him of her own free will. However, the king's response was cold and dismissive. He laughed at Amba's words, saying that he no longer wanted a wife who had been taken by force and was betrothed to another. He told her that as a just ruler, he could not accept a woman who did not come to him willingly. The rejection cut deep into Amba's heart, and she felt the weight of Salwa's words like a snake shedding its skin despite her pleas and tears. King Salwa refused to listen. Amba's eyes filled with anger and sadness as she realized that she was being cast aside once more with a heavy heart. She vowed that truth would be her protector, no matter where she went, and so with a sorrowful cry, Amba left the city of Salwa, determined to find solace in the righteousness that guided her. As she departed, King Salwa's words echoed in her mind. I am in terror of Bhishma, O thou of fair hips, thou art. Bhishma's capture, the pain and rejection still lingered within Amba as she made her way back to her family, her heart heavy with the knowledge that even the mighty King Salwa had not been willing to accept her. As Amba stepped out of the city, a sense of sorrow washed over her like a dark cloud. She walked alone, her footsteps echoing through the stillness, her heart heavy with despair. There is not in the whole world a young woman in such a miserable plight as I, she lamented to herself, rejected by Salwa, abandoned by Bhishma, and now forced to fend for herself. What was the point of living? Amba's thoughts wandered back to her father, who had arranged her self-choice, expecting her to secure a suitable alliance with Saul, a foolish man. Why hadn't he considered the consequences? And Bhishma, that mighty warrior who had permitted her to leave his city in search of a husband, what right did he have to abandon her? Like this, Amba's anger and frustration boiled over as she cursed Bhishma, her father Salwa, and even the gods themselves. As night began to fall, Amba sought refuge in an asylum for ascetics, surrounded by wise men who lived simple lives devoted to spiritual pursuits. The next morning she poured out her story to them, every detail of her abduction, rejection, and heartbreak. The ascetics listened with compassion, their eyes filled with understanding. Among them was the venerable sage Saikaveya, a master of the scriptures in Aranyakas. He approached Amba, his face aglow with empathy. If it hath been so, blessed lady, he said gently, what can high-souled ascetics like us do? We live in our retreats, engage in penances, seeking to purify ourselves. Amba's eyes welled up with tears as she replied, her voice trembling, let mercy be shown to me. I desire a life in the woods, having renounced the world. I will practice the severest of ascetic austerities. All that I now suffer is certainly the fruit of those sins that I had committed from ignorance in my former life. Saikaveya listened attentively, his eyes never leaving hers. He nodded gravely, understanding her. Salwa sage spoke words of comfort, drawing examples from the scriptures to guide him on her path. You are not alone, child, he said softly. We will instruct you in ascetic penance. we will help you find solace and peace with his promise. The other Brahmanas nodded in agreement, their faces filled with kindness as Emma listened to Sekaveya's words. A sense of calm began to settle within her for the first time since her rejection. By Salwa she felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps in this new life of asceticism she would find redemption for her past mistakes and learn to forgive those who had wronged her. The thought brought a faint smile to her lips, and with it a sense of... In the depths of a forest, a group of virtuous ascetics gathered around them, a young princess who had been abandoned by her father's family. The ascetics debated what to do with her, some suggesting she be taken back to her father's city of Kesai, while others thought it best to reproach themselves for their failure to protect Harris. They deliberated. One of the ascetics, a wise and compassionate man named Hotravahana, arrived on the scene. He was a maternal grandfather to Emma and had been searching for his granddaughter in the forest. Moved by her plight, he decided to take charge of the situation.